So my name is Ewa Kaleta and I am a fashion strategy master's student at RTS. And today I'm very excited to speak to Kristine Harper, who came to Arnhem for the Fashion Colloquium on searching for the new luxury. Kristine Harper is an assistant professor at the Department of Sustainable Fashion at Copenhagen School of Design and Technology, and her research focuses on such themes as sustainable product design, philosophical aesthetics, and emotional durability. So my first question is that in the book you present different strategies for designers with guidelines to reduce, rethink, and reform consumption. Which strategies would you point out as the crucial ones regarding to the subject of searching for new luxury?
Yeah, it is true that I have quite a few strategies of working with aesthetic sustainability, and also because it's a very broad term and there are many ways to approach it. So I think talking about adding time to products really makes sense when we're talking about the new luxury. Talking about the production time, even showing the production time in the product itself, emphasizing that things have been thoroughly made, have been maybe made by hand or due to new technologies or waste collection or something like that. Like the production time and the technology, research, the hands that have formed the object, I think adds value to objects. And I think that is a new luxury today, that people know that and they are maybe willing to pay for that and get connected to products because of that story.
How does designer can actually literally put this thing
the time
into design?
Because one thing is of course like the storytelling. Obviously you can tell a story about, you know, some people that have been hand weaving your products in South America or India or wherever, and that's obviously interesting, and I think it will create a bond between the product and the receiver. But maybe more interesting, I find actually adding the time, literally charging a product with time. It's a term that I use in the book, that you really think about it as you charge time into the product. And that could be done by literally leaving traces of the production in there. At a point I had a student that worked with, every time she was creating a garment, and every time she would touch it, when she was actually making the prototype, she would dip her hands in ink, so the traces would be left. And of course that's a very literal way of translating the idea of charging time into a product, but still maybe it makes quite good sense in this talk, because it's that's really how I think it. That you're actually charging the time that you've thought or put into it, into the product itself, and that it leaves visible traces there. Yeah. And I'm thinking also, because now we're talking about time, and when I work with time and products, I work with what we've been talking about now, like kind of like the time that goes before the product is released, so to speak, but also the time after it's released. What happens when the product leaves the hands of the designer and kind of leads its own life, you could say. It becomes someone buys it and then it's theirs. Then what happens? What happens in that time? And maybe also interesting to look at, could the colors change when they are when a garment is being used and maybe the body heat interacts with it, would it then maybe change? Could you add some kind of flexibility to it? I think that would also be a very interesting way of working with aesthetic sustainability.
So I feel that sustainability, I don't know, has a kind of bad PR, or is it the nomenclature problem? Do you think we need new vocabulary for sustainable fashion to make it more broad?
Yeah, I agree. I do think so, because it's often when you say aesthetics and you talk about sustainable fashion, you think that it's kind of like neutral, maybe just very plain cut.
Or earthy colors.
Earthy, maybe kind of hemp materials with that kind of color. And I mean, to me, sustainable aesthetics it can be anything really. I mean, it can also be really complex products that you are intrigued by and want to return to, and are thought-provoking in a way that you can't kind of let go, that keep fascinating you, and that's also very sustainable. aesthetic sustainability is really about reducing consumption. So whatever a product can do to encourage that, really, that you make the person that owns the product want to maintain it, because it could also be because it's minimalistic and neutral and you can always wear it and mix it with all kinds of things, or of course that is a strategy. But it could also be because you keep finding pleasure in it and you keep finding it interesting, fascinating, thought-provoking, and really something that underlines your identity perhaps as well, because that is also what fashion is about.
I would like to take advantage of your academic background in philosophy and arts and ask you what is your main definition of aesthetics that you use in your research, in your life?
Well, I work primarily with the aesthetic experience, and because of when I say that, it's of course then it's with the receiver. The idea that something happens in the interaction, and that's what's interesting in a way. So it's that interaction, it's the experience between the object and the subject that's interesting. What happens there?
So that means that we can here talk about the meaning of aesthetics beyond the visual part of it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Of course, it can be visual. Something can happens because you are intrigued visually.
This is something that catches your attention, right?
Yes, absolutely. But it can also be something that, it could be very tactile. I mean, we're talking about clothes, and clothes are kind of an intimate product. You wear them on your body, and of course the tactile feeling of how does it feel to put it on, to wear it, is important, I think, very. And that's a part of the aesthetic experience too, of course. My point talking about the experience and the aesthetic experience is that when you have had an aesthetic experience in relation to an object, a garment, it does something to you, and you are just less inclined to just discard it, because it gave you, in philosophy, and when you have the aesthetic experiences, it's something that kind of builds you up, nourishes you. Yeah. It's an important part of human well-being, and actually it's something that we feed on in a way. I mean, I think it's a really important part for human beings. So I think if fashion can kind of like encourage that, even like educate people within this field, like make them experience like how good it is to be nourished aesthetically, I think people are more inclined to invest in better products and maybe buy less. Yeah,
I like this, that when you are talking about the nourishment and well-being in the context of sustainability, we usually talk about the nature, the earth, the planet, and I agree totally, we have to take care of it.
Yes.
But I like that you also bring in the human dimension here, and well-being, which fashion was always supposed to serve well-being, but actually when you look at it, the history, it made it totally opposite, right?
Yeah.
So I like this point.
Yeah, that's been really important for me to kind of bring that humane aspect into sustainability. That, I mean, it's of course important that we use sustainable materials, collect garbage and reuse that, but unless we are able to create products that actually nourish people aesthetically, that they actually find aesthetically pleasing, they are probably not going to buy them and maintain them. So it is just a really important part of sustainability that we have to remember.
In your book, you just created the kind of toolkit for designers, let's say, or just those guidelines. What is, based on those experiences already, your vision on this methodology for future? How would you like to see it? And do you think like this methodology should be core of every designer in the future, or like?
Yeah, well, I mean, the methodology I created is based around those two different aspects of aesthetic sustainability that you mentioned, that either you can go with kind of like the neutral, comforting look, expression, which I call the pleasure of the familiar, or you can go with kind of like the challenging, thought-provoking expression, which I call the pleasure of the unfamiliar. Yeah. And I think both are really important human needs. I mean, at times we need to be within our comfort zone. Absolutely. I mean, we can't all the time be challenged, then we go crazy. Yeah. So a lot of products actually really, even though you say your fellow students find it boring to work within that kind of category, it's important to do so sometimes, and to really get into, okay, how do we actually nourish this receiver's comfort zone, give them exactly what they expect, give them the exact tactile experience that they expect when they look at this piece, that it works the way they expect it. That is sometimes really a way of making us feel at home in the world. And in general, aesthetic experience do that. Makes us feel at home in the world. The pleasure of the unfamiliar does, more or less the opposite. It challenges us. It makes us think about things in a different way. What is a jacket? Can you use in different ways? Why do we need this object? So on. It can be in many different kinds of ways. It can also either be quite kind of like bodily, phenomenological, or it can be more like working with the symbol side of clothes. How do we want others to view us? Identity, all these kinds of things. And that's also really important to challenge people, and some products have to do that. And both experiences can create durability if we are nourished and given a comfort providing familiar experience. That can be really sustainable because we will return to that. But also if we're challenged, that can be really comfort providing.
Yesterday also you were explaining the difference between emotion durability and aesthetic sustainability.
Yeah.
Can you maybe just try to sum up
briefly? That's like a pretty big question. I will do that briefly. But actually, the reason I also mentioned emotional durability is because when I first started looking into that, I found it really fascinating. I still do. Also, majorly because that's also like a humane approach to sustainability, that we're talking about, that emotional connectivity between me and an object is actually really important when we talk about sustainability. Aesthetic sustainability can beneficially be used in a strategic manner, I feel, and that's what I did in my aesthetic strategy as well. Whereas sometimes emotional durability can be a little bit hard to work with strategically, unless, of course, you make it into a more like thematic approach.
Yeah.
Because those really emotional stories we have, why we are connected to, this vase that we inherited from our grandmother, or this jacket that we got from our boyfriend, or whatever. It's super subjective, and it's based on our personal stories and what we've done in our lives. So in order to work with that, either we need to make it into a theme like homeliness or love, and then go from there. But aesthetic sustainability goes in and looks at, okay, so these objects you are connected to because of emotions, but at the same time, there are also some objects that you use again and again and again, because some objects that we are connected to emotionally, we just store away because we keep them, but we don't use them. It's not our favorite jacket, maybe.
Yeah, like you said, they don't work aesthetically.
They don't work aesthetically for us, but we keep them because of the story. But the ones that we do use, and maybe also have the emotional connectivity to, work for us aesthetically, I find. And then that's a little bit easier to an extent to go in and analyze. Why is that? Is it because they are, have a certain composition? Is it because of a color harmony? Is it because of like a tactile variation that we find intriguing? And that is actually quite easy to implement strategically in a design process. So that's how I've kind of differentiated between those two. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes.